HP Lovecraft gave a powerful voice to numerous miscreants from beyond the stars, but do we know what that voice sounded like? On today's episode of the Nerdy Sumerian, we are going to talk about H.P. Lovecraft's voice. H.P. Lovecraft's distinctly acerbic voice left its mark on several people who were disturbed enough by it to describe it in writing. And while it's true that H.P. Lovecraft didn't leave behind any audio recordings of his work, you might be surprised that he almost did. So, was Lovecraft's voice dynamic and awe-inspiring? Well, not exactly. Much like Abraham Lincoln's voice, Lovecraft's voice is the opposite of what one might expect. As it's described in the few written accounts, Lovecraft's voice was actually rather awkward and high-pitched with a thick New England accent. You see, in Lovecraft's formative years, his mother had a smothering presence and kept him rather sheltered. Indeed, Lovecraft spoke mostly with his family as he was growing up, and although he had a few close friends, he didn't really interact that much with the world around him, instead burying his head in books, falling in love with astronomy, and beginning to write his juvenilia. As such, Lovecraft had very little confidence while he was speaking with others, and it showed in the overall caliber of his voice. His old friend John T. Dunn said that in group gatherings, Lovecraft awkwardly looked straight ahead unless spoken to, and if someone would get his attention, he would murmur a response in a very low monotone. Dunn described Lovecraft's speaking voice as high-pitched, but not exactly shrill. Dunn also said that Lovecraft was rarely touched with anger when he spoke, so his voice was fairly consistent dynamically. Another of Lovecraft's friends, Wilfred Blanche Tallman, who was a bit more critical of Lovecraft's voice, described it as flat with a slightly nasal quality, which he considered stereotypical of a New England accent. Due to Lovecraft's growing up in Providence, Rhode Island, his accent likely conformed to the southeastern New England English dialect. Among other things, this accent drops the R at the ends of words, making the word car sound like ka. To illustrate, here's an example of a Providence, Rhode Island accent from the Speech Accent Archive. I've electronically given the voice a somewhat higher pitch to make it closer to how Lovecraft's associates described it.
Please call Stella. Ask her to bring these things with her from the store. 6 spoons of fresh snow peas, 5 thick slabs of blue cheese, and maybe a snack for her brother Bob. We also need a small plastic snake and a big toy frog for the kids. She can scoop these things into 3 red bags, and we'll go meet her Wednesday at the train station.
What a bizarre set of sentences they had him say. Well, anyway, you get my drift. It's not exactly the kind of voice that he's usually portrayed with in media. That's not to say that Lovecraft couldn't get a confident voice when he wanted to. His wife Sonia noticed that although his voice was thin and high-pitched in general conversation, to the point of having a falsetto ring to it, Lovecraft did indeed have a striking reading voice. Indeed, Sonia says that when Lovecraft read his favorite poetry, his voice became clear and deeply resonant. Lovecraft's interactions with people, while always a bit awkward, were significantly improved after he married Sonia Green and simultaneously moved out of the house his mother lived in. It was also around this time that Lovecraft developed a certain bit of notoriety around the weird fiction community. Lovecraft moved with Sonia to New York and for the first time in his life was thrust into the middle of a crowded city. He had to interact with people more frequently and was developing many long-distance relationships due to his interaction with the pulp community. As such, Lovecraft did develop better speaking skills, and despite Lovecraft's voice remaining awkward later in life, he never missed a beat in conversation when he was in his element among good friends. One of these friends, the talented Frank Long, wrote that Lovecraft's conversation was always lively and marveled that Lovecraft had such command over his vocabulary that he never paused or struggled for the right word to say. Lovecraft's laugh was an entirely different story, though, according to his friend Wilfred Tallman. Tallman remembers that when Lovecraft would laugh out loud, he would blurt out a harsh cackle, which resembled a ham actor's version of a hermit's laughter. According to Tallman, people who spoke with Lovecraft would intentionally avoid making jokes in order to avoid Lovecraft's embarrassing fit of shrill laughter. So we've got a good idea as to what Lovecraft's voice sounded like, but how awesome would it be to actually hear Lovecraft singing? In fact, we almost got an audio recording of HP Lovecraft, and I'm not talking about that hoax newsreel that was created for the release of the 2007 Cthulhu movie. Lovecraft, as a teenager, entertained the idea of becoming a singer, and he recorded himself onto a blank Edison vinyl in 1906. Being a teenager, he was quite enthralled by the idea of becoming a singer, and he originally had the idea of becoming, in his own words, the world's greatest lyric vocalist. Lovecraft, however, did not like the results, which he called weird and wondrous ululations, and he saw to it that the record promptly disappeared. Later that year, he recorded another song, a ballad influenced by John McCormack. He was only slightly happier, however, with the results, which he compared to the wail of a dying fox terrier. He promptly shattered this record as well, and simultaneously shattered any chance of us ever hearing his singing voice. Was Lovecraft being unduly harsh on his singing voice? Perhaps. I mean, his mother certainly adored his singing voice. But later in life, his wife Sonia described his singing voice as sweet but not particularly strong. And so Lovecraft's singing voice, like his speaking voice, was likely a bit on the awkward side. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Nerdy Sumerian. If you want to see more stuff like this, then go ahead and like, subscribe, and all that. Thanks for watching, and stay eldritch. Sumerius out.